Okay, testing. Councillors, we're just going live for a minute to check audio and visual. Testing 1, 2, 3. I need to talk a little bit longer so Kim can get the sound absolutely correct. Looking here at our agenda. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. Councillors, being 6 o'clock, I'd like to declare the ordinary meeting Blayney Shire Council for June open, and thank you all very much for your attendance. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and as such will be recorded as part of the proceedings here this evening. Councillors, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land here on which we meet this evening, the Wiradjuri people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging. Recording of meeting, as I've said, this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Apologies, I do believe we have an apology, Mr GM, from Councillor Ewan.
Mr Mayor, we do have an apology for Councillor Ewan.
Can I have a move that that apology be accepted? Thank you. Councillor Newstead has moved that way. Councillor Reynolds has seconded that. I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Disclosures of interest. Mr GM, do we have any disclosures of interest for the business here this evening?
Mr Mayor, we have one declaration of interest, and that is from myself, Mark Dicker. The meeting is tonight. The report title is Richards Lane, Stage 1 Culverton Approaches. It is item 4, page 22. The reason for the interest is previously declared non-pecuniary interest to note the entrance to my private residence is approximately 820 metres from Richards Lane, Millthorpe. It's non-pecuniary, it is less than significant.
Thank you. No other further disclosures of interest, councillors? Okay, we don't have any public forums, councillors. We have no mayoral minute. I now refer you to the minutes of the previous council meeting. Page 5, held on the 21st of May, recommendation there. Do I have a mover? That is a true record, please. Thank you. Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goswich, thank you. Second that. I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, any matters arising from these minutes? If not, I'll refer you now to page 13, item 2, which are the minutes of the previous extraordinary council meeting held on the 11th of June 2024. Recommendation there. Do I have a mover? That is a true record. Thank you. Councillor Goswich has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Newstead. I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Any matters arising, councillors? Councillor Reynolds.
Just a query on what was said in the extraordinary council meeting. Before we pay the funding agreement for Orange 360, that we confirm that Cabon has taken up its membership. So just because that was actually discussed in that meeting. So I have no idea whether they have or haven't, but as in just to confirm that Cabon has before from what I understood, the agreement is enacted. Thank you.
That's good news.
I don't know if they have. It's to confirm if they have.
Oh, okay, sorry. So they had. On that, Mr.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Reynolds, it's my understanding that it's going to the July meeting. It is in the budget and it's going to the July meeting. Come on.
Okay. Positive then. Councillors, any further matters arising from those minutes from our extraordinary meeting? If not, I'll draw your attention now to page 16, item 3, report of council investments as at the 31st of May 2024. Recommendations there, 1 and 2. Councillors, have a mover for these recommendations. Yep. Thank you. Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Reynolds, thank you. Councillors, questions or comments in regards to report of Councillor Reynolds?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering if an extra inclusion could take place from the start of the next financial year, and that is to provide the actual interest earned, because I think this is an estimate of how much interest that was actually earned, as in all money invested over the period of May, as opposed to what we actually received, and also a year-to-date, financial year-to-date sum, as in moving into the next financial year. So hopefully that wouldn't create much extra work, because we do have some of the reports below on, that we had 4 investments mature and they gained that amount of money, but we also have 2 other investments with Commonwealth Bank that also earn interest, etc. So just to have a separate or 2 separate columns, one on the monthly earnings, of actual monthly earnings, and secondly the year in total as you move in from July through to June the next year, how much we've actually earned in interest. Because this is just, from what I understand, an estimate of what we've actually earned in that month.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any further questions? Report of council investments? No? If not, I have a mover, I have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared. Carried. Move now through to page 22, item 4, Richards Lane, Stage 1 Culvert and Approaches. I'd like to move recommendations 1 to 4. Call for a seconder.
I was going to move with an amendment.
I think you'll
Mayor,
say
but
you're happy to second it with an amendment.
as long as we can put up an amendment.
Thank you. We have a
which I
seconder,
think
Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Reynolds, you have an amendment.
hopefully Lauren has that amendment.
Okay, thank you.
So, given I
Councillor
assume
Reynolds,
we can talk to it.
please
So
talk to your
I
amendment.
have left 1, 2 and 3 as are. In number 4, I have modified to some extent that this is a councillor-led review, and with the terms of reference to be determined by councillors, but to include the processes that have resulted in the increase in expenditure or to expenditure in the 2023-24 for the Richards Lane Stage 1 Culvert and Approach project. I think it might actually be Stage 3, but I stand to be corrected. May just need clarification there to have it accurate. I assumed it's Stage 3, but it might be Stage 1. And then that Councillor Somervale to chair the review panel, with Councillors Ferguson and Reynolds to make up the rest of the review panel there. And then the panel findings, the review panel findings to go to the Audit Risk Improvement Committee, and also to come back to Council the findings from those that review panel's findings. So they're the major changes that I have proposed. So they're all centred around 4 and 4A, B and C. Just some rewording of those latter 2. The reason being is to actually have the councillors undertake a review, as opposed to where it sits at the moment, that there's no one actually guided to undertake the review. So we're leading to councillors to undertake this review, and that also some terms of reference, which I won't go into tonight, be developed by all the councillors together to come up with what needs to be had a look at, but it must include the process with regard to Richards Lane and the stage. I don't know if the General Manager actually has whether it's Stage 1 or 3 confirmed.
Mr. Mayor, I'm pretty sure it's Stage 1, as per, is it the map on the next page for the report 23?
You are correct. Sorry,
Stage 1.
General Manager.
Yeah, no, yep.
So anyway, that's pretty well the broad outlining of what I'm proposing to change there, Mayor, to have a council-led review and create some terms of reference around that review into the processes that have resulted in this, but other potential expenditure overruns that have come before council in the past. I'll leave it there unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. As the mover of the motion, I'm more than happy to support your amendments. And before I call upon my fellow councillors for any comments on your amendments, I'd just like to make note that in this particular item, I'll be calling for, I'll be putting each motion as individual motions. So what we're talking about now is the amendment to number 4 that Councillor Reynolds has put up, which I, as a mover, as I've said, I'm happy to accept. Councillors, the amendment that Councillor Reynolds has put up, any questions or comments? Councillor Price-Jones.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Ferguson. I just had a question around the wording, probably in point 2 around approve the supplementary vote for expenditure. Isn't it?
Sorry, Councillor, we're actually
It's a
discussing the amendment that Councillor Reynolds to number 4.
Well, you can put it somewhere else, I suppose, but I'm going to talk to that, if that's okay. And if it needs to go somewhere else, it can go somewhere else. But my point would be around the whole motion, is that the supplementary vote of expenditure for Richards Lane Covert. I would suggest that those words are not quite correct because it's actually an over expenditure or out of budget expenditure. So to make that clearer, so whether I'm asking for another amendment.
Yep, no, and that's why, Councillor, I've decided as chair to actually take each one of those points as separate motions. So you can please, we can please refer to that when we do that. Councillors, at the moment we're still looking at the amendments to number 4 that Councillor Reynolds has put up. I hope you've had a chance to consider those. Myself, Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Somervale had a meeting with staff last week where some of these ideas were tossed around, and here we are considering them tonight.
If in relation to that, I still believe that we should be seeking an independent review.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, no other questions or comments. Councillor Reynolds, do not want to add anything more to your amendments?
I'm happy to just put it up.
Okay, so councillors, I will put the amendment. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. So that amendment number 4. I'll now refer back to the original recommendations, and as I've stated, councillors, we'll now consider each motion separately. So, council, item 1. Do you have a mover for item 1? Thank you, Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to item 1? If there isn't any, I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Now move through to number 2. Do we have a mover and a seconder for number 2? Thank you. Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Do I have a seconder for number 2? Thank you, Councillor.
Happy to second for debate purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds.
But can I seek clarification? Does Councillor Price-Jones want to actually do an amendment to this motion or a section?
Yeah, well, now we've got a mover and a seconder. We now have a conversation. Councillor...
Can I just... I moved item 2. And I know, Mayor, as chair, you've decided to put each of the 4 separate paragraphs as separate motions. One of the problems that comes up because of that is we're now talking about number 2 to approve the supplementary vote. Now, it may well be that I'm happy to make a supplementary vote, but I'm certainly not happy to make a supplementary vote unless we have a full review. And at the moment, I won't know whether we're going to have a full review because that's a separate item to be talked about later. So that's,
I'm happy to move that forward, Councillor Somerville, if that's what you're suggesting. Since the amendment was approved
Well,
unanimously, a fair chance would be supported.
yeah, well, I think what would deal with Mike, and I don't know whether I've made myself clear about that, but
More than happy to bring number 4 forward.
yeah, I think
Councillor
if we
Somerville.
brought number 4 forward and it became number 2, so we can commission effectively the review. One is we note the report, and 2, we have a review. Then, if those 2 are passed, then we can deal with the question of whether the expenditure is approved, which gives rise to different issues.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, Councillor Somerville has proposed to move item 4 to now, being item 2. As chair, I'm happy to accept that. Is the chamber happy to do that?
Seconder, I'm happy to accept.
Okay, thank you.
So but we're not seconding something, are we? So we're actually withdrawing the moving and seconding.
Yeah, let's just put number 2 on the back burner. So number 4 will become number 2, and I'm sorry for Lauren, if you can do that for us, change the numbers would do. Councillors, draw your attention now to item 4, which is now number 2, which was part of the amendment that was approved by Council a few short minutes ago. Do you have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Somerville has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to item 4, which is now item 2? In regards to the review.
I've already made my comments, so yeah, previously.
Thank you. Councillor Price-Jones.
So I just wanted to repeat myself around the fact that I still think that it needs to be independent.
Thank you. So, councillors, we have a mover in Councillor Reynolds, seconder in Councillor Somerville in regards to the council review. I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Please let it note Councillor Price-Jones has voted against it. I'll declare it carried. Now move through to number, which will be number 3, which was formerly known as number 2.
3 and 4 could go together, Mr. Mayor. 3 and 4 could go together. It was 2 and 3.
Doing this one now.
Sure.
Councillors, we are now considering on the original report, which was number 2, which is now number 3. Everyone right? I know it's a little bit confusing, but we need to... Right. Okay, we have a motion there. Councillors, to have a mover for this motion. Thank you. Councillor Somerville has moved that way. Thank you. Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillors, questions or comments in regards to this item? Thank you. Councillor Somerville.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess I should speak to this, having just moved it. There's no doubt that what's happened in relation to the expenditure on Richards Lane to date has given rise to a couple of pretty serious issues, serious things that all councillors need to be concerned about, and I would divide it into 2 categories. One being the very substantial overrun in expenditure for stage 1, originally budgeted at $140,000 or $150,000 and now up to $904,000. Now there's explanations for that in the report, but that is an extraordinary blowout in expenditure, and that of itself warrants a very close look at what happened and why it was that we have spent so much money. And the The second aspect, which is also probably just as serious, some might say even more serious, is the fact that we've committed to spend that money by entering into a contract with a contractor, and we've got to have to pay the money. It's committed, and we've got to pay it. If we don't pay it, we'll be sued. How it is that we've committed to pay $904,000 when it hasn't yet been voted on by councillors. Now, the report says that it was intended to be dealt with in the March QBRS, but was omitted. And that's the second serious aspect. One is the cost, and two, the fact it wasn't included in the budget. And to my mind, they are the two serious things that warrant this review. And I think all councillors should be concerned. But I think, having said that, there's a problem, and we councillors have got to cure the problem. I think the most efficient way to cure the problem is to vote the funds ex post facto, but in so doing, making sure that we make sure it won't happen again, make sure what happened, and make sure that the council policies, procedures and processes that slipped up in this case, apparently, don't happen again. So with that explanation, I'm happy to now approve a supplementary vote of that expenditure on the basis that we're bringing it forward. Well, we'll get to item 3, which is now number 4 in a minute, but on the basis we're bringing it forward from next year's operational plan.
Thank you, Councillor Somerville. Councillors, any further questions or comments? Sorry, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't know if it's a correction or an addition, maybe in addition to Councillor Somerville. The actual project is, for this section is going to cost around about $1,050,000, but the supplementary vote is for 904. The second point to note, in looking at the March QBRS, there was actually about $460, I think it was, $1,000. I don't have it open in front of me, actually noted in 2 contracts. So this amount of money is way, way more than was even potentially noted but wasn't actually put into the March QBRS, so it was in the contract section. So this is more than double what could have potentially come to the QBRS anyway. So it's a very substantial increase in expenditure for this first stage of a project, and we, as the report says, we only have about $2.2 million, and we've spent well over $1 million already on this small section, which was a very difficult section and very understandable, but it is important to note that the actual expenditure for stage 1 is well over $1 million. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, we're still considering item 3. It's a separate motion. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Price-Jones.
Thanks, Mayor. Ferguson, overall I'm incredibly disappointed with the results of this, and understand that we need to move forward. However, I'm just not sure that the items in this particular motion are going to lead to change and an appropriate level of investigation that how this has all happened. So that's where I sit.
Thank you, Councillor Price-Jones. Councillors, if no further questions or comments, I have a mover, I have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Please show the record that Councillor Goswich and Councillor Price-Jones have voted against it. I'll declare the motion carried. We now move through to, which is now 4. A separate motion will reduce the budget expenditure. Okay, the General Manager is just informing me we need to make a slight addition. Just expenditure for the project.
Just after the word "for," it needs to say "the project." Left, Lauren, left. Yep. the project. Yep, the project.
Okay, councillors, we have a motion there. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Councillor, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Second that. Councillors, questions or comments in regards to item 4? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually going to speak against this one because we're going to run out of money. Reducing by 904,000, we're leaving less than around about 1.1 million, say 1.2 million, for the whole project. And looking at stages 2 and 3, we're going to need more money rather than less money. I understand the motivation behind the recommendation, as in because we've approved a supplementary vote, but we should be actually increasing the funding for this project. Otherwise, we're not going to finish one of the stages, and I suspect probably stage 2, unless another supplementary vote takes place to increase the budget for the next financial year. So as it stands here at the moment, I'm against canning the project, so I'm against reducing the budget expenditure on it for the 24-25 operational plan. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Reynolds, I mean, obviously as far as stage 2 and 3 would depend on full design and costings before a new council would consider what that would cost. There's no doubt we're going to be short, but again, we've just committed to move that money, so it has to be paid. Councillors, still discussing item 4. No action in the 24-25 operational plan. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Somervale.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I understand what Councillor Reynolds says, and I agree with him. It seems pretty clear to me that having spent so much money on stage 1, the money we have in next year's budget to complete the project, stages 2 and 3, is very likely to be insufficient, probably by a considerable margin. So I think that's just a fact we've got to accept, and a fact that if we're going to get the project done as originally scoped and planned, we're going to need to find some more money. But I think that doesn't necessarily mean we don't reduce the budget by the amount we've effectively brought forward to the current financial year. I see this really as a corollary of the resolution we've just passed, number 3, to vote 904,000 for this year, effectively bringing forward that amount which was intended to be spent next year. Whichever way you look at it, we're still likely to be short, but at this stage we don't know how much we are likely to be short.
That's absolutely correct, Councillor Somervale, and again I'd reiterate that we won't know that until a full design and costing is done on stage 2 and 3, and then there'll be a decision for council about what that cost is. At the moment, it's total speculation. Councillor Newstead.
Yeah, just quickly, Mr. Mayor. So, with all this though, there's been work done that wouldn't have been done until next financial year, hasn't there? So we've had to bring the money forward to do that work because certain people wanted it done quicker than it probably should have been done. So, you know, it's a hard one.
Yeah, look, there is no doubt that the next, as I said, it needs to be fully designed and costed up, and then that will be a challenge, whatever that number is. We all expect it to be more than what will be the residual in that project. So I guess, again, it's speculation until we know exactly what the costs are. Councillor Goswich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the question I'd have then is how can we adjust the budget for next year if we haven't worked out what it's going to cost. We're actually changing the budget. Why aren't we adding more to that budget now and voting on it? If we've already scoped it, looked at it and planned it, because we did have a budget in the original budget. So we're actually voting on something that we already had a budget for, and now we're actually changing that budget.
Well, my understanding, the budget was the actual amount that would allocated for resources for regions. We have not got a final design or plan to actually know what that cost is. So, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Goswich, the initial sums were an estimate done, not based on a detailed design. They were worked internally, but not at a detailed design level. So that's what went into the budget.
Further questions or comments? Okay, I have a mover. Councillor Price-Jones.
So does that bring into question how we're putting together our budgets? Just a comment.
With estimates, as we've seen from some other projects, we also agreed that we need to resource our design capabilities a lot better. So we do understand exactly the cost of these projects. I don't think we'll have the urgency of to spend grant funding in the near future under this current government. So we will have to make time and resource sources committed to making sure they do understand what those prices, what those costs are. Councillor Goswich.
Supplementary then, following on Councillor Reynolds' comment, if we vote no on reducing the budget for the 2024-2025 plan, where does that leave the project?
No, until a final costing.
Like a governance thing with our budget.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if that 0.4 is voted down, that remaining to me means the budget remains at $2.2 million for that year. Council would need to identify a source of funds for that. So it's kind of reverse engineering, if that makes sense. The report, my point is, if 0.4 is voted down, that means the budget stays at 2.2, but council would need to identify where that source of funding comes from right now. The report was detailing that stages 2 and 3, when it's tendered, would give the opportunity for council to know what is needed at that point in time, rather than allocating that money from another source right now.
Okay, if that makes sense. Future looking.
Can I,
Councillor
I suppose make a couple of comments.
sorry, Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Councillor.
in
Councillor
our-
Somerville, you have the floor.
In our capital expenditure budget for next year, which is obviously the important one, but also other years, we identify not only projects we want to undertake, we identify the cost of those projects, and of course the further out the project is, the more rubbery the estimates are, but nevertheless we put an amount on it. And in the financial plan, we identify how we're going to fund the capital projects. In this particular case, we have identified, I think there was the 147,000 or something of flood money, the balance were resources for regions money, and the amount in the budget equalled the amount we had available through grant funding. If we leave 904,000 in the budget for next year, it'll sit on its own without any indication of where we're going to find the money. So I think if we're going to leave 904,000 in next year's budget, in the same breath or the next breath, we've got to indicate where we're going to fund it. And the problem is, but by taking it out of next year's budget, it'll very clearly show the amount of money we've got left for this project based on the funding we've got available. It will highlight very clearly when we do get final pricing just how short we are. If we leave it in there, seems to me we'll leave it in there without any indication of where we're going to get the money. So of the two evils, I'd rather take it out and expose just how short we're going to be rather than put it in there without any indication where we're going to find the money.
I certainly agree, Councillor Vale, and the 904,000 might not be enough anyway. So,
Wager on that.
well, the total 2.2. Councillor Reynolds.
It was going to be a question along exactly the same lines as Councillor Somerville. He must have read my mind, but I will expand on it a little bit through to the General Manager, through you, Mayor, that if we did vote to leave it in, one may assume that it would come out of unrestricted funds at this point in time, but it's a question to the General Manager. Am I correct or am I incorrect if we did leave it in the project funds?
Through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor Reynolds, firstly, the Code of Meeting Practice requires if it's going to stay in, you must actually articulate the source of funds. Where that money is going to come from. Unrestricted cash, as per the policy, if it was going to be left in, I would recommend taking it from the Developer Contributions General, of which this project was actually to benefit a significant and facilitate a better outcome for a development. That was 904 may not be enough, so there may be a further supplementary, we don't know. So I'd rather do it in one consideration when we know what's going on rather than two parts.
So, as in considering everything, I'm actually going to change my opinion, which is good that with regard to debate and listening to everyone's opinion. And while it's to my better judgment, I'd rather leave it in so that the project is funded. I can also understand what the GM has, the General Manager has just said, with regard to we actually need to as in go out to tender and actually see what it's going to cost and then make a decision. And there may be other sources that I can think of, but again, don't want to commit council tonight to any particular source until we have a rough idea of how much it's going to cost. But I do strongly suggest when we go out to tender, and I know we're not talking about the tender here, that we actually potentially look at two separate tenders or two tenders that a tenderer can apply for both or one, because working on Transport for New South Wales roads requires certain qualifications and there is generally a price premium from what I've been able to ascertain in any tender for that stage, which is the main road as opposed to Richards Lane itself, and whether the scope should be to just near the intersection, as in stage 2 actually moves a bit closer. But again, that's for the staff to try and develop a tender document. But I'm just worried that we may be paying a premium if it's all in one tender item, as in you're going to cut down your operators, and we also may be paying a substantial premium. So I would like, and it will be up to the new council to make that decision, but speaking from personal experience or personal observations, that it should be broken up into two separate tenders, with the option that the operator could actually apply for, that's doing the Transport for New South Wales, could apply for the other tender as well.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Mr GM.
Through Mr Mayor, Councillor Reynolds, it's my understanding that the tender will be done as two components known as separable portions, that has the intersection and is close to it, and then the rest. So it should be clear. That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillors. If there's no further questions or comments, I have a mover, I have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Record Councillor Bryce-Jones has voted against. I declare the motion carried. Okay, councillors, now move through to page 26, item 5, the Cabon After School Care Program. There's recommendations there 1, 2 and 3. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Thank you, Councillor Newstead has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goswich, second that. Councillors, questions or comments? This has been hanging around for quite a while. Councillor Reynolds?
just a question through to, I assume it's the General Manager, but as it may be Director of Corporate Services. With regard to the continue with its commitment of contribution of $5,000 towards, is there any time frame, as in is it 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? What's the time frame on this commitment?
Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Reynolds, Council has provision in the long-term financial plan for the $5,000 contribution, and has historically been a commitment by Council, so that there is no time frame. So I suppose in answer to your question, it'll be until, it'll be until the service remains in existence. So
Obviously be
Could I
considered an
move
operational plan.
I'll move I was going to foreshadow, but I'll just move to straight away an amendment with number 2, operated by Cabonne Council for a further 3 years. We review it after 3 years again, so rather than infinity or the 10-year plan. But so I don't know if there's a second that'll.
Absolutely.
We have amendment there. I mean, I would have thought the councils would have considered it every 12 months on part of the operational plan, but happy to see it there as 3 years. So there's amendment there, councillors. Councillor Newstead and Councillor Goswich, are you happy to have that amendment in item 2? Yes, Councillor Newstead? Yep, thank you. Okay, councillors, we're still considering the combined after-school care program. Any further questions or comments? We have that slight amendment by Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Price-Jones.
Just a comment, thanks, Mayor Ferguson. I just think you just mentioned that, it would be normally reviewed as part of the operational plan. And I get that now, after 2.5 years. I wouldn't have got it in year 1 or year 2, that it was part of the operational plan. The only reason I knew that we were doing that was because it came to us asking for more money. So I think it's wrong to assume that everyone has all the nuances which is in that plan. I certainly don't, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, councillors, I have a move, I have a second. If there's no further questions or comments, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, now move through to page 29, item 6, the adoption of the 24-25, 27-28 delivery program and the 24-25 operational program. They have recommendations there, 1 to 7. I would like to move those. Do I have a seconder for these recommendations? Thank you. Councillor Goswich has moved that way. Councillors, here we have our operational and delivery plan, and I'd like to acknowledge all the work that all councillors and staff have put in, and acknowledge the contribution of the community in regards to the last few months, especially as we've considered this special rate variation. But I'm very, very confident that if approved here tonight, that this operational plan and delivery plan will deliver some really positive outcomes for our community over the next 4 years. Questions? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to propose an amendment and see whether I can get a second or not with regard to an extra project, and I'll explain and talk about it shortly, but with regard to a footpath from the Trunky Street, a footpath that's just been constructed in Newbridge across to the toilet block. So I'll just see if I can get a seconder before I
Thank you.
talk about it.
Sorry, we have a seconder by Councillor Goswich to Councillor Reynolds' amendment. Whether councillors have had a chance to read this or not. Good. Councillor Reynolds, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. This particular project, the first stage has been fantastic. I was in Newbridge on the weekend for the Winter Solstice Festival. Fantastic crowd. The event has been expanded, and the footpath was used and used extensively until you got up to the tennis courts. And then people were traversing across the grassed area, tripping on tree roots that were coming out from the pine tree. And I actually, while I personally didn't trip, as in was near someone who did trip with regard to it. Now, there's an obvious gap, and I have provided each councillor and all the staff with a map of a potential proposed footpath. Again, I'm not a design engineer, and there may be a few constraints, as in it may have to go closer to the neighbour's fence in front of the tennis court to have a more flatter area, even though roughly where I've drawn it there is a reasonably flat area. The other area that I have also tried to include is accessibility. That we have a barbecue, or there is a community barbecue and picnic tables there in the middle of a grassed area, so it's next to impossible to get a wheelchair into that area. So in this recommendation that I've put up as number 8, that's on the screen at the moment, it allows accessibility for someone that parks in the accessible car park space next to the Brian Bennett Pavilion and going down the footpath. It also links the community and the public with the toilet block. At the moment, there is actually no footpath that links the main part of the village to the toilet block. The existing footpath, as you can see with the diagram that I have provided, stops in the middle of nowhere. And so this proposal is to put the footpath around, as in, and link it up with the toilet block, which links it up with the footpath network around the Brian Bennett Pavilion and the hall, the community hall, the playground, so that it enables children, parents, grandparents, and everyone else in the community to actually access these community facilities via the footpath network. At the moment, they can't. And that is really, really sad. The original scope that I saw back a couple of years ago for this project included a connection. Then it vanished. It came out, and despite repeated requests to actually get it back in, nothing has happened. Now, as the General Manager has indicated, that you actually have to have a funding source, so I have actually proposed a funding source, or 2 funding sources for this project. I guesstimate, and again it's a pure guesstimate, that it's probably going to be around about 60,000 to do it, or slightly under. So I have proposed to take some funds from the Village Enhancement Program and also some funds from unrestricted funds to fund this, a small proportion from each fund. I've also proposed on the other end, down in, I think it's Toomey Street, if my memory serves me right, I think it's here, yes it is Toomey Street, that the footpath again stops before you actually can access the street. So there was actually mud, which was a bit sad on Saturday, for anyone to access it, as in particularly if they have accessibility issues. So the proposed recommendation number 8 also includes the working of that footpath. I think it adds to an event and to a community that has actually achieved a lot, and the existing footpath is fantastic, so I take my hat off to the staff and the organisations that constructed it, including the footpath area around the hotel and the I don't know if you'd call it the balcony, or how it comes out the front, once we've got the fencing up, which hopefully will be done this week, that it'll be a very great facility. But this finishes off a project that wasn't in the plans, and again, I have asked the staff to include it, and it wasn't in the OP or the DP. So in the next 4 years, there was nothing there in the budget. As in, the community feedback is something needs to be done, And so I am proposing this. It's not a substantial change, and as we've just heard, the new council is going to have to look at least $900 and maybe $1 million more in supplementary votes next financial year to fund Richards Lane. So a supplementary vote here, or a change of potentially $30,000 or thereabouts as an estimate from council funds, and $30,000 from the Village Enhancement Program. And I've had a look, I think they've got $49,000 in the Newbridge Village Enhancement Program funding, and I assume that there'll be more money if this budget is passed tonight for the next financial year, so there will still be some money for the Newbridge Progress Association to continue other projects in the community. So I propose this amendment, and I look forward to debate and hopefully support from fellow councillors. Thank you, Mayor.
Very much, Councillor Reynolds. I certainly agree. Saturday, like yourself, and myself and other councillors were out there. It was the most wonderful day in Newbridge. Probably one of the better events I've ever been to in the Shire. It was just a wonderful day, and congratulations to everybody involved. Mr. GM.
Through Mr. Mayor,
say something.
Councillor Reynolds, in relation to the proposed amendment, the thing that I highlight is there is no dollar figure. So to include it in the DPAP, we would need a dollar figure. We have not scoped or designed that project, so I actually couldn't even hand on heart sit here and pull a dollar figure out to include. That's the one. Highlight that I don't know what it'll cost. What's to be included in the DP in terms of a dollar. I'd prefer that if we went and designed the project and then costed it for future years, that would be.
Thank you, Mr. GM. Councillors. Councillor Reynolds has put up an amendment which we are speaking to. Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Reynolds' concept for this extension of the pathway, for the reasons he's indicated, very strong. But having said that, this is one occasion where I'm not going to agree with Councillor Reynolds. I think a couple of reasons for that. One is we've just seen on the Richards Lane fiasco, if I can call it that, just how easy it is to run over estimates, and we don't even have an estimate for this one yet. So there's a risk there. Secondly, we know we've got to find a lot of extra money for projects that are already in the forward plan. This one's not there. Maybe it should have been, I agree, maybe it should have been, but it's not there. We've been developing the OPDP now for quite a few months, and this is a last minute change. I'm sort of naturally reluctant to undertake last minute changes, particularly when council staff are advising against it. I think it would be a pretty bold move to put it in now, with the staff recommending against doing it at the moment, although they are recommending we set aside some money to scope it, which is better than not having anything in there at all. I agree with that. And the other thing is we've gone out with our SRV calling for more money, and the basis on which we've assessed how much additional funds we need through the SRV has been based on particular capital expenditures and so on. I think it's a bit strange, having just gone out for more money, to be putting additional capital projects in the budget that are not there at the moment. So for all sorts of reasons, my gut feeling is that probably not a good idea to commit to doing this project next year, particularly when we don't know how much it is. But I do support the concept that we should allocate some money, say $10,000, to properly scope the project so we know exactly what the project is and get some idea of how much it's going to cost and take it forward from there.
Thank you, Councillor Somerville. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Price-Jones.
Thanks, Mayor Ferguson. I guess I'd just like to comment around, I do believe the project should be finished. I wasn't here when the original scoping or plan was done, so I can't comment too much on that, except that I do have a lot to do with the Newbridge community just generally, and it would the work that's been done out there is amazing, and it seems a shame for such a small area that it shouldn't be finished, and just so that we might complete a project, which is something that I haven't really had the experience of since I've been on council. I think it's interesting that we're now talking about, which is absolutely fine, around no scope, no costing, we can't possibly do it, but we were just told a minute ago that often what goes into the budget is just an estimate, and we don't have any control over that. So I'm getting some double messages here, and but I do think it's a great project. I'd love to see it come into next year or into the next year. It's not a lot of money, maybe. I don't know. It would need to be scoped properly and addressed then, but I wouldn't preclude it from this change. I wouldn't preclude it just because we're now talking about, for the next budget, apparently we're going to scope and cost everything before it even hits in the budget. So.
Thank you, Councillor Price-Jones. I guess I'm certainly very supportive of your comments in regards to, and Councillor Reynolds indeed, because I, again, was out there and actually seen how the crowd use that space, and there is no doubt that is needed. But, and I think it will happen at some stage, but I just, picking up on some of Councillor Somervale's comments, is the fact that it is uncosted. We've just, a previous item we've considered major overruns of estimates. 60,000 is great, but what if it's 120 or 180? And I would suggest that this review that councillors have just supported, one of the recommendations that might come out of it will be that we do not adopt estimates, uncosted projects into our ongoing budgets, operational plans, delivery plans. So this is part of the learning of what is happening to councils all around New South Wales who have been flooded with funding, grant funding, where we've all had to put up estimates but have had the liability of going over those estimates, which has fallen onto the ratepayers. So the money's been great from a funding point of view, but without proper scoped up projects, and again, we've just previously discussed one, is invariably going to run over budget, and that's where our ratepayers have to foot that overrun. So it is a concern. I think there's plenty of opportunity to go out. A new council will go out and engage the villages. I'm sure Councillor Reynolds will be very supportive of that. I'm sure the community out there would like to see that footpath there, but as Councillor Somervale has said, that is a new spend. We are committed to looking after our existing infrastructure, our existing facilities, and investing more in roads, and that's what we've told our community, which will happen over the next 3 to 4 years. So very supportive of that footpath extension. I'm not sure how it disappeared out of the plan, but it has. It needs to go back in the plan, and it needs to be costed properly. Councillor Newstead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I was out there on Saturday as well, and I know what Councillor Reynolds is talking about. If it's put into the plan for later on, and I've seen it done before, if there was a grant funding opportunity, can it then be brought forward, or even is that something that the Newbridge Village Committee could push for, try and look for a grant to get it done, so it's not actually coming out of a set budget? Or
Well, we are pretty committed to a lot of footpath projects right around the Shire, and Councillor Reynolds would be aware of that. That's his favourite pastime, is footpaths. That's one of his passions, and he's very good at. So any funding, I guess, would be targeted at footpaths, so the decision would be where that footpath money gets spent. It could be spent in Blayney tomorrow. Could be spent in Millthorpe tomorrow as well. So,
are you saying that one footpath that might have been done in Blayney, we could drop that and do the one at Millthorpe, or?
I'm saying if the funding opportunity became available, the question would be, the funding opportunity would be for a footpath somewhere, and it's like, where does that go? It wouldn't automatically go straight to Newbridge. There'd be plenty of other options.
So, in other words, if we say had it in the plan for 25, 26, but a funding opportunity became available, it could be brought forward into 24, 24, 25, maybe?
Mr Mayor, it's highly unlikely we're at max capacity now for next year, even probably over, plus carryovers from this year. But look, if council wanted to in a future year, I mean, we'll be going through this process again in 12. It's up to council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Newstead. Councillors, all footpaths lead to Newbridge. Councillor Reynolds.
Not quite sure.
Councillor, would you going to close the debate, or is anybody
I
else?
just wanted to make a suggestion, but I'm not quite sure on meeting protocol whether I can actually do this or not. So, as in wrap me over the knuckles after I've suggested it and say I can't do it if I can't.
Well, do you
But
want to speak
I was going to
first?
amend my
Councillor,
amendment.
just that, Councillor Reynolds. I know you've been jotting there, but I'm getting the eye from Councillor Somervale who'd like to comment.
No, we may be once again on the same page. I'd like to foreshadow, if this amendment is not carried, I'd like to foreshadow another amendment, which to make sure this doesn't fall off the radar, because I agree it's a really important project to finish this footpath. The paragraph 8 should read, allocate $10,000 from the Newbridge Village Enhancement Plan to scope, design and cost construction of a footpath from the Three Brothers Road footpath to the accessible toilet block at the showground.
Probably word for word, but Councillor Reynolds.
Not quite, but as in along the same intent. So, yeah, as in if this one is lost, then I'm happy to, yeah, as in that's what I was proposing to do, to actually get a costing, get a scoping, and then as in hopefully, but I was also going to put by December of this year, as in as a time frame, so 6 months into the financial year to have something come back to council, for then council to have a look at it and potentially put it into the 25-26 budget, so that there's actually something there, not do it at the end of the financial year and the budget process is already gone. So I wanted to try and have a time frame, was the only sort of difference, Mayor.
Councillor Reynolds, would I be so bold to suggest that you withdraw your amendment and support the foreshadowed amendment?
Given the way the debate has gone, I'm happy to do that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Just to expedite the decision-making process, we'll just wait a minute.
We'll have to second.
Councillor. Councillors, we'll just give Lauren a second to catch up with the wording. It might be a bit unusual, but let the minutes show that Councillor Reynolds, with the support of Councillor Goswich, I believe, is withdrawing his amendment and is replacing it with, it won't be a foreshadowed amendment, it will be the amendment. Councillor Reynolds, even though it is... Oh, well, Councillor Somerville, would you like to move that? Councillor Reynolds.
I'm just going to ask through you, Chair, can we actually put a time frame though on it so that it's in February at the latest that comes back so that it can go into the budget process?
Everything should be time-bound.
Mr Mayor, we are on a yearly basis, but I can't have individual projects specified like that. We need to be able to get in and list them on priority, particularly grant funding. And I'll be honest, this one will be at the lower end of the queue given higher priorities to other projects. So I can't have a timeline like that stipulated. It's in there, it's going to be a resolution, we will have to do it, but it's not the highest priority for next year.
It certainly have to be done for consideration. Doesn't turn up, as Councillor Reynolds suggested, the 11th hour. By the new council at budget time.
Just also with regard to the other end, so Toomey Street, the ramp there, as in whether it can be not in the recommendation but in the background, that the scoping includes an accessible concrete area for next to the table, So my original amendment that was withdrawn, as in could it be used as background information for this proposed amendment? I suppose it is a new amendment, so that the staff understand the scoping of what they're scoping, as in to actually have a look at that.
Through Mr Mayor, we'll use the withdrawn amendment as the basis for what to design and scope.
Very happy with that then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reynolds. So I have a mover for the amendment in Councillor Somerville and a seconder in Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, you have the amendment there. Before I put that, any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put the amendment. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. The amendment now becomes part of the motion, of the original motion, becomes number 8. I have a mover and a seconder. Do I have any further questions or comments in regards to Councillor Goswich?
Just with submission number 1, Maria Street, Blayney. I see the response, which I'm quite happy with. I just wonder whether next time we have an arborist, can we get someone to check those trees which are on council property? The ratepayer seems to be concerned about the trees falling on a house. So next time we have an arborist doing some work in the Shire, is that possible?
I do.
Through Mr Mayor, I'll pass that on to our Parks and Gardens to initially have a look. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Goswich. Councillor Reynolds.
Councillor Goswich finished? Yep. I just, with regard to the Maria Street, as in whether council can look at any better water flows. Again, I suspect in having a look at this area that the driveway and the piping through is probably a bit higher than what we've cleaned out the drains to. So there's now potentially some pooling, as in the driveway access to the property that fronts Adelaide Street, but is accessed off Maria Street. So I don't know if there's any solution without potentially concreting the drain, which would be very expensive and may not achieve a great deal. But if council can have a look at whether that's the limiting factor in not allowing water through, or whether there is something else that's not allowing a flow of water, as in through that area, as in it is the driveway creating a dam, I suppose, is what I'm trying to drive at. I don't know the answer, as in I'm just asking if council staff could have a look to see whether that's part of the issue from this ratepayer and the concerns that she's brought forward.
Through you, Mr Mayor, a number of staff actually exhausted time and dedicated time and resources to this correspondence with this person. So a number of things were looked at, including significant expenditure in terms of cleaning up that drain recently in the year as well. So we've had a serious look at what is going on there.
Thank you.
Mr Reynolds?
So the second one from the other ratepayer with regard to, I'll put a question through to the General Manager. Is there any way that we can look at a yearly fee, as into for access, and again, whether it's for the actual shed or just for the one of those squares, or I wouldn't call it a ring, I suppose it's a square for horse exercise, or is it a case for an individual user as opposed to a group of 5? That's from my reading of the submission, that there's this concern that for an individual to actually utilise the facility. So is there any way, and if there was a potential that can come back to council as a modification to the fees and charges, but I'll just throw through to the General Manager, is there any potential or opportunity, or is it pretty well there is no way that we could come up with an annual fee?
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds.
Through Mr Mayor, anything's possible. It would be significantly resource intensive to do that and then follow up those annual fees. Someone needs to ascertain, what does this facility, is it primarily a community-based facility for all the community, or is this an individual use for an individual? Because that could then have implications on bookings against at community events with more participants as well. So, look, I don't have an answer per se, but this facility is heavily subsidised by Blayney Shire ratepayers. It's how far do you go?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Price-Jones.
Thanks, Mayor Ferguson. Just along the same lines, I guess we've done a lot of work engaging our local user groups for the big shed and had some good results out of that. But we've also, in that, sort of indicated that there's some appetite to improve that facility, continue to improve that facility and make it more accessible and inclusive. I think the rate thing's always going to be a problem, but I don't see any harm in actually really having a good look and bringing that on later in the year for really, before we approve the next year's rates, to have a really good look about how that could look, because the cost, I guess, is associated with the cost is an arbitrary cost around the whole cost of the facility, but and that's being levied on riders. I'm not sure I don't know whether it's levied on soccer clubs or whoever else uses it, but I'm just wondering how fairly that is applied across all the different user groups. So that would be something, and I think we've talked about those kind of things coming up as being a bit of a place for a conversation. I think we need to encourage more people to go and use it. It's the only now, I guess, what you would call public undercover riding arena in the area. There's a lot of riders, and I think if we could be creative around how people might be able to use that and access it, I think would be well worth some time and effort.
Thank you, Councillor Price-Jones. I certainly agree there must be, and picking up on Councillor Reynolds' comments, the opportunity to actually think a little bit harder and more strategic about how to use that facility. It is a very popular facility, it is growing, and we do like to see it used, but we do need to be wary of the cost. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to look at the overall budget, I suppose you could say, now as opposed to the submissions. And it's, as you've highlighted already, as in there is a proposal here for the 10% SRV, special rate variation, to go ahead. I think it's important to highlight to the community, for those residents that live in Blayney Town or Millthorpe Village per se and have sewerage, general rates and garbage, that their rates as a whole, so that if they have those three services, are going to go up on average, and I know I'm using the statistical average, which probably no one actually fits exactly, but less than 7%. Overall, their rate bill will not be going up by 10%. So there's been some misinformation out in the community that they just believe the whole rates bill is going to go up by 10%. So can we, from a council staff point of view, if this recommendation is passed, actually communicate with the community about what their actual rates bill is going to go up if they're in Blayney and on average, and I know, again, as I've just highlighted, there's no such thing as average, but that it's not going to go up by 10% across the board, that it will, and if you have a garbage service and pay general rates, then it's probably going to go up by about 8%, but again, I don't have the figures exactly in front of me. If you're just paying rural rates with the resource recovery levy or whatever it's termed, it'll probably be just under 10% because I don't think we're increasing that. I think we're going up by 4%. So again, a communications package with the community once this budget is passed on what actual rates are going to go up, right, as opposed to, so your sewage, and it may not be a good idea to actually use the less than 7%, but to say general rates are going to go up by 10%, garbage rates are going to go up by 4%, sewage rates are going to go up by 4%, the sewage levy is going to be unchanged, so it won't go up, move at all. The garbage levy, whatever it's termed, is going to go up by 4%, etc. So to actually explain to the community that it's not across the board 10% rate rise for particularly residents of Blayney and also Millthorpe.
There's no doubt that communications around this will be worthwhile. It is a little bit complicated, so the messaging's got to be spot on. And as you say, averages, it's hard to apply to individuals, ratepayers, but I think there is generally a story to tell. obviously, about what the next 12 months looks like. I'm just not sure how we put together a communication that's clear enough that people do understand. To GM.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Reynolds. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It would be a very hard task to do because everyone's rates vary so significantly as well, and different parameters and factors that factor into it. So we can't do a direct calculation that everyone's rates will be going out by X point X. I think the com should be go to our rates calculator on our website, because you can then input that data and see that change. So that would be the best.
But I did also highlight to actually say your sewage rates are only going up by 4%, as in so that to actually highlight the different categories that a ratepayer may get. So I had second thoughts about saying 6.7% or whatever the average is going to go up in Blayney Township, to more as in the general rates will go up by 10%, sewage by 4%, garbage by 4%, and the others by either 0 or 4%, depending on what levies. So
Mr. Mayor, I'll take that with the Manager of Communications and Tourism and Communications. We are literally prepping for the rates newsletter now, so I'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, still on the adoption of the 24-25 operational budget and delivery program. There's no other further questions or comments. I have a mover, I have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Turn your attention now to page 42. Item 7, the adoption of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee Terms of Reference. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 recommendations there. Councillors, do I have a mover for these recommendations? Thank you. Councillor Somervale has moved that way, and Councillor Goswich, I believe, has seconded that. Councillors, questions or comments in regards to this much discussed item? Councillor Somervale.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. As our representative on the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee, I may just make a couple of comments. Yes, this resolution is drawing together quite a few strands that have been bubbling along in the last few months in relation to the new arrangements for audit committees as from the 1st of July. The first one, adopting the terms of reference, which have been out on exhibition. Secondly, appointing myself to be the continuing non-voting councillor member, effectively only for one meeting, formalising the terms of appointment of our existing 2 members, so there's a little bit of a staggered termination date there. Reporting on the recruitment process for our 3rd independent member, who we should have in place by the 1st of July, and formalising Donna Reigate as our chairperson. So there's a lot of things that have been going on. They all come together in this one resolution. I think the only thing I would say in addition to that, in relation to the recruitment process for the 3rd independent member, we have a panel comprising Donna Reigate as chair of ARIC, together with myself representing Blayney, Councillor Reynolds representing Central Tablelands Weeds Authority, and Councillor Cook from Central Tablelands Water representing CTW. We had 30 applications for the independent member position, which was amazing. The committee decided on 4 applications to interview. We carried out interviews of 3 of those 4 this afternoon, and we have the final one tomorrow. So I suspect we'll be in a position, the committee will be in a position to have a recommendation before too long. Certainly well and truly in time for our July council meeting. Thank you.
News. Thank you, Councillor Somervale. Councillors, any further questions or comments in regards to this item? I've been disappointed.
I just wanted to actually thank the Director of Corporate Services for actually compiling this recommendation, because it took a fair bit of work to actually come up with the correct as in to cover everything, and I think he's done a fantastic job. So I just wanted to thank the director for spending the time to actually come up with the recommendation which covers all aspects.
I certainly concur, Councillor Reynolds. It has been quite a complicated issue. Okay, no further questions or comments. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Move now through to page 62, councillors. Item 8. Consider the data breach policy. Recommendations there 1 and 2. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Price-Jones, thank you, has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Reynolds, second that, thank you. Would you have a question or comment by any chance, Councillor Reynolds?
No.
Okay, just asking. If there's...
Thank you for asking, Mayor.
No, if there's no... Looking around the room, if there's no other questions or comments, pretty straightforward, I believe. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, moving through now to page 74, item 9, Infrastructure Services Monthly Report. And please note that we do not have our director here, but I'm sure questions will be answered if possible, or at least taken on notice. So recommendation there, report be noted. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Councillor Newstead, thank you. I second that. Councillors, questions or comments? I'm suggesting Councillor Reynolds, who moved it, might like to make a question or comment.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Firstly, and I haven't been there this week, with regard to Stabbock Street, have we been able to seal it now? On the weekend it was still unsealed, so I don't know if the acting director knows if the sealing has taken place.
You, Mr. Mayor. Haven't had notice yet. I'd have to take that on notice to confirm. I'd expect it would have been done, but can't confirm it yet.
You just
Maybe you can check on your way home tonight.
with the weather. Well, I might do that. With the weather forecast, I'm just because again I think they're forecasting showers tomorrow, so hopefully it's done. But anyway, we'll wait and see. The next question, and you may probably need to take this on notice. I've had a resident question how far the table drains on Victoria Road are actually going to be cleaned. Because the council has 5 kilometres of Victoria Road, but one of the farmers was asking whether, as in we're going to go, he'd heard we were going to go all the road, and I thought I'd be surprised, but again, as in, so I doubt if the director would have an answer tonight.
Yeah, certainly take that on notice, I would suggest.
Yes,
Yeah,
Mayor, yes, I would have to.
As long as it's not in Cabon, that'll be the main thing. I'd suggest, Councillor Reynolds.
We're not
Mr. Mayor,
paying
I
for.
think to Eves Lane rings a bell.
Mr. GM?
but I-
Okay.
Yeah, to Eves Lane rings a bell, but we'll take that on notice. Yeah.
That's where the big issue is with water pooling, is to
Correct.
Eves Lane. So, but the landholder is just the other side of Eves Lane, going towards the Cabon section. So, he just asked me to ask if I could clarify exactly how far they were going. I thought it was to Eves Lane, but again, we'll find out. Also wanted to congratulate the start of the work on Trunky Creek Road. So the actual table drains that are being cleaned out over there this financial year, I assume in anticipation of roadworks, with the budget allocating, I think it was about $2 million for roadworks next financial year. So as in more just a congratulations. With regard to Richards Lane, which I know we spent a lot of time on tonight, when is it expected, or was it open today? I'm not 100% sure, but when was the opening, or is the opening hopefully coming up sometime this week? But just clarification again, you may not be able to answer.
It's actually opened for use. Mr. Acting Director.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd have to take that on notice as well.
Thank you. Fingers crossed it's this week, because we did sort of promise the community by the end of June. But anyway, if it's not, it's not.
But through
Mr.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Reynolds, I'm pretty sure it has been sealed, and it was just while it was closed, allowing it to harden a bit further months. Thursday or Friday may even ring a bell.
Thank you. I think that's all at this stage. I just wanted to, on the other side, and I did mention it before when we were talking about the Trunky Street footpath, as in fantastic, well used on the weekend. So again, and I know it was a combination of council design and contractor construction, but fantastic. So just pass on that, you know, it was a job well done, and it's been over a period of time, but yeah, real congratulations. And it was really shown with the amount of foot traffic that actually used it, and several fellow councillors were observed exactly the same. So a well thought out footpath and well utilised with that event on the weekend, which I know they only have one major event a year, but it was great to see the amount of usage, and I'm sure the village children and adults are also using it as well. So fantastic. So I just wanted to pass on thank you and congratulations for completing to this stage. Hopefully we'll get some other stages in the future with regard to that. I think that is all I have for tonight, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. I'd just like to concur again. The footpath was greatly utilised for the event. In fact, the event probably wouldn't have been as good without it, because it was just such a busy afternoon. But also I lost count of the amount of people who acknowledged the improvements in front of the hotel, that larger area now. Like I said, I lost count of how many people came up and said that is just wonderful. And it was just like a grandstand, I guess, for that type of event where people could look down onto the street and see everything that was happening. And certainly looking forward to seeing that finished with the rails, and that will be wonderful. And looks like I've triggered a thought of
I missed one
Councillor
item,
Reynolds.
Mayor. With regard to the speed zone change here in Adelaide Street in Blayney, I was just looking, and I've read the social media comments, and they're varied, and I saw a story on 7 News with the General Manager, and as in generally well received, as in the public comment was all positive, which is fantastic. Social media, some keyboard warriors have said some different things, some positive, some negative, but I just wanted to resonate one comment. I had a look at the traffic statistics of deaths in our state, and I think it's sitting at around 350 annually now. It was, I think, below 300 or thereabouts a couple of years ago. But out of that, 46 pedestrians die in New South Wales each year. So if this traffic change over 5 years saves one life, as in it is more than worthwhile. So I really get concerned that the keyboard warriors and what they believe and know, overall, as in hopefully this is a real positive, as in the speed that vehicles do go through, as in does vary, but personally fully supportive, because it is a high pedestrian area, and hopefully it will either save a life or save some people from being injured, and that's statistics only for deaths, as in there are literally thousands of pedestrians injured each year on the state's roads. I don't have the statistic though, so yeah, as in fully support and endorse what council decided to do. I think it was 18 months ago. So I just wanted to make that comment as well, Mayor.
I couldn't agree more, Councillor Reynolds. I'm sure all your fellow councillors would agree totally as well. Councillor, still on the Director of Infrastructure's report, Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on the sewer strategic business plan, which has been a concern of mine, as councillors know, for many, many years. It's 11 years since we adopted our existing plan. It's well and truly overdue, and I see we've now got a 12-month extension to complete it. I was looking forward to it being completed by the end of this year, and now we've got another 12 months. Now I know we're using Public Works because we got a grant, and the grant was conditioned on using Public Works, so we really had no choice about who was going to undertake the plan for us. But I just expressed my disappointment that the program is blown out by another 12 months. And by the time we get a sewer business plan, it'll be something like 13 or 14 years since our last one, which I think is, for such an important council asset, which requires a lot of maintenance, a lot of planning, a lot of future work, to have such a long gap between strategic plans, I think is pretty, well, I was going to say unacceptable, at least just from my point of view. That's all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Somerville. Councillors, still on the Director of Infrastructure's monthly report. Any further questions or comments? If not, looking around the room, we'll have a mover, we'll have a seconder, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Move now through to page 79. Item 10, minutes of the Traffic Committee meeting held 7th of June 2024. Recommendations there, councillors 1 to 4. Do I have a mover? Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Newstead, thank you, has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to the minutes of the Traffic Committee meeting? Councillor Reynolds.
Mayor, just with regard to Forest Reef's Torwood intersection and great the bus zone, and relocate the give way signage, but with regard to the no stopping signage, and I haven't had the opportunity, but with the couple of residents that live along that section of which I think, it's Long Swamp Road, have they actually been communicated with what council's about to potentially agree to tonight? Has there been any communication? I don't know if the chair of the traffic committee may be able to answer that or not.
Can we have an answer, Councillor Newstead?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure about that, but I know when the road was first being done, there was quite a few cars still parking out the front. But over the last, because I travel it most nights, over the last month or so, or not that long, a couple of weeks, there's been no one parking there. So maybe the acting director can answer that question.
Mr. Mayor, I'd have to take that on notice as well.
Yeah. I'm sure we'd know about it if people hadn't been informed, I think, Councillor Reynolds.
Could I just suggest before we put the signs up that we actually let them know? That just as in whether it's a letterbox drop for the two. I think there's only 2 houses, or either 2 or 3, along there. But just to let them know, because I have seen before where things have been done like that, and they get quite outraged because they haven't been consulted. So at least let them know. It would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Goswich.
Just on the investigate the one way of Adelaide Lane, was that from a resident or was that just general public, or how'd that come up?
Well, it would come from a resident, I believe, but it was actually mentioned on social media as well during the time of the 40Ks down the main street. Somebody put on there, isn't it slower? So we're gonna put traffic counters out and see what the count is, and it's going to come to the next meeting, I think, of traffic committee.
Over the years, Councillor Price-Jones.
I also have a comment about that, thanks Mayor Ferguson, around, I brought this up when we were talking about the Blayney plan, and that particular part of the road being one way literally can't happen because the trucks that come into IGA, not there? It's a
Adelaide Lane.
So, sorry. Oh, okay, sorry, I was thinking about Farm Lane.
And I do remember it was
I stand corrected.
the daughter of one of the ladies that lived right on the edge there, so I won't mention her name. She sent a letter to the traffic committee about it, because I'm...
All residents there now too.
Yeah, up in that street, yep.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Somerville.
Before we leave that topic, I'd also noted that one. Where has it come from? I was interested in that, and that's been answered. But is there some preference for which way, one way, from Ogilvy Street or from Church Street?
I think from from Ogilvy Street. So, because where the problem is when people are coming down from Ogilvy Street, they get to the intersection and there's a couple of fences there that kind of block the view. So I would imagine, and that's why they're going to look into it, that it'd be able to turn in off Ogilvy Street, go out onto Church Street. So.
Okay, well, we'll need to look closely at that. There's a lot of impacts in one-way streets. Okay, councillors, still on the minutes of the Traffic Committee. Any further questions or comments? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Now through to page 88. Item 11, report of the Central New South Wales Joint Organisation Board meeting held 23rd of May. Recommendation that be noted. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Goswich has seconded that. Councillors, questions, comments regards to this report? The great opportunity to spend a bit of time with Jenny Atkinson, which we thought was quite positive, myself and the General Manager, who's our Minister for Transport and Roads. Councillor Reynolds.
I was just going to say the conclusion there, the joint organisation continues to deliver very good value to councils, and I'm sure they do have reports from time to time. I vaguely remember, or do remember, financial reports, so hopefully there are some more reports, because words, as in a picture or a table, speaks 1,000 words. But anyway, I'm sure there will be reports coming.
That's right, it's part of the new council, new councils right across the region, 11 new councils. There'll be representations made by the JO around the education of what the JO does and the benefits it does deliver. Okay, any further questions or comments? I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, we do have a matter to consider in closed committee. So in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993 and the Local Government General Regulation 2021, in the opinion of the General Manager, the following business is of a kind as referred to in section 10.2 of the Act and should be dealt with in a part of the meeting closed to the media and public. Item 12, Contract S1 2024 for the supply and delivery of bitumen emulsion. This matter is considered to be confidential under section 10.2a of the Local Government Act, as it deals with commercial information of a confidential nature that would, if disclosed, prejudice the commercial position of the person who supplied it. Councillors, can I have a mover that we go into closed committee? Councillor Newstead has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Seconder anywhere? Thank you, Councillor Somervale. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. We'll now go into closed committee. Thank you, Councillor Goswich. Okay, we're back on. Councillors, we're now back into open council and consideration of the report of the contract S1 2024 for supply and delivery of bitumen emulsion. The recommendation which was approved was that council accept and enter into contract with Bitupave Limited for the supply and delivery of bitumen emulsion, which was passed unanimously. Okay, councillors, that concludes our business here this evening. I thank you all very much for your attendance and declare the meeting closed.